Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the Mad Mamluks. I'm Mahin and I'm here with my co-hosts, Sheikh Amir Saeed and Sim. And today we have a very special guest that we're really excited about, Dr. Shadee Al-Masry, calling in from New Jersey. For those of you who don't know, Dr. Shadee is someone who has excelled in both the traditional Islamic sciences as well as the academic field. He's from New Jersey and studied in this Muslim world in Fez, Morocco, Hadramaut, Yemen, Cairo, Egypt, as well as the Haramain Sharif in Mecca and Medina. He has a master's from the George Washington University in comparative religion and a PhD from the University of London, the SOAS, which I assume is the School of Arts and Sciences.
Oriental and African Studies.
Oriental African Studies.
SOAS, yeah.
In the on the Dawah in the works of Imam al-Haddad. So, Dr. Shadee, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you on. We've talked about having you on for a few months, and alhamdulillah, we finally got this squared away.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you guys for having me.
You know, Sim had mentioned you to me a few months ago, and I'd never heard of you, so I did a quick Google search and listened to some YouTube talks and whatnot. And I think I heard some of your interviews and some other maybe podcasts you have done, and I was pretty impressed. And I remember I was driving around city of Chicago with a friend of mine, and this friend comes from the Tasawwuf, traditional Islam background. So I thought, you would be because I kind of pigeonholed you in that little group based upon what I had heard. And I told this guy, you should check this guy out. Do you know him? Dr. Shadee Al-Masry? And he was like, yeah, man, I know him. I don't like him. I was like, why not? I was like, why not? He's like, cause man, he's not speaking well of the senior scholars. I'm like, what do you mean? And he talks, the point was he wasn't too happy about, which we'll get into right away, is the critique you had of the study Quran based upon its perennialist ideologies. And I kind of left it at that. It's funny because Sheikh Hamza Makbul, I think, who you also know, we were talking this past weekend, and I told him that story, and he was like, these guys are all just fanboys. They haven't read a study Quran either. They just don't like it's all groupthink. It's like they don't like that someone may have disagreed with it because their scholars were on it, even though they're scholars themselves. Who knows if they read it or what their perspective is. So I want to start it off by talking about the perennialist stuff first, and then
and before we even get into perennialism, we define what it is so that some of the laymen can understand.
Good. So you know that a lot of people. I went to the GW, George Washington University. Didn't know. Have a clue what perennialism was either back in 2002. I had seen Sayyid Hossein Nasr's books. Everyone had seen his books at some point if you were involved in any type of Islamic environment. So honestly, I thought Sayyid Hossein Nasr, he's like some Pakistani uncle or something that was really good at Islam and science. That lo and behold, he's at the university and he ends up being my MA advisor. So I developed a good relationship with him. And I respected him a lot, and he was very good. He gave me a lot of time and helped me a lot along the way. We didn't know what perennialism was until some of his students were actually murids. They would say things that we didn't understand what they're saying, right? Until finally we got to the bottom of the Sophia Perennis, as they call it, right? Or the perennial philosophy or eternal wisdom, right? And a couple roommates I had at the time, we got into it deep in just to discover it. But one of my friends sort of went into it actually, and alhamdulillah, Allah pulled him out of it, but he was heavily into it. So what this perennial philosophy is that it's like a viewpoint in the philosophy of religion, okay, which considers that every religion out there holds a universal truth, okay? A universal truth, right? At the esoteric level, at the inner level, okay? And then every doctrine, all the outward is relative, but the inward is all the same, okay? So we say about this, why is that problematic? It's problematic for a couple reasons. First of all, we believe that all of these past faiths, yes, maybe all of them have derived from something true. But we know that they can't be relied upon, right? They're what we call muharraf. They're altered. They've been altered, right? Not only that, we have in the Quran Allah telling the prophets, not just us, the prophets, if another messenger comes after me, okay, you must follow them, okay, right? لَتَتَّبِعُنَّهُ وَلَتَنْصُرُنَّهُ, right? 2, so if a prophet exists and he has the truth and another messenger comes in, that prophet or that messenger leaves his message. You are no longer in charge. You are a follower to this message, okay? And this has happened in the past, right? You have many prophets. A messenger comes. He now has to follow that messenger, all right? So, for example, Prophet Isa came. There were other prophets around. His cousin was a prophet, right? Prophet Isa came after his cousin, Yahya. So Yahya now follows Prophet Isa bin Maryam. So we have these examples. And we know that Prophet Isa will follow the Prophet Muhammad's Sharia afterwards. So it's one thing to say that all religions derive from some truth. It's another thing to say that they retain these truths, right? That they retain these truths and that we could still take from their sources and that whoever follows them is saved, right? Is saved. And validity and salvation overlap, but they're different questions, all right? So, and when it comes to salvation, we say that Allah has obligated upon us, right, to follow, the most recent updated religion, which is Islam, okay? As whom He puts in the fire, all we can say is that Allah promised that the end result of following any other path will lead to eternal damnation. Okay, that's what we believe. Okay, of course, today it's an age of feelings, so they might hurt people's feelings, right? And this has affected people's discourse. In truth, you'll notice it's politically incorrect to say that anything leads to hellfire anymore. But notice the languages, we're saying that beliefs lead to the hellfire. We're not necessarily making a categorical statement about individuals, that this person's going to hell, we can easily say they're on a path that leads to hellfire, right? And whether or not the da'wah has reached this person, whether or not they've understood it, this ultimately is with Allah Azza wa Jal. But we believe all these paths, other than Islam, are not leading you to salvation in the sight of Allah. He is not accepting them, right? One of the mashayikh said it's like a passport, right? If they he was an Ottoman sheikh, and he said, I'm not getting this new passport, stamped by Ataturk, right? Kemal Ataturk. So, they told him it doesn't make a difference whether you have what you say. You're not traveling if you don't go get that document. And this is how the other world is, right? You need the documentation to move on spiritually, and that documentation is to believe, is not on paper, it's beliefs. Which leads you now to what this individual said. Oh, he's not respecting of the senior imams. People make mistakes the sheikhs, seniors, elders make mistakes all the time, right? There are some mistakes that are unacceptable, right? Something of what is daruriyat ad-din, right? It's a daruri of the deen. It's required, right? And he cannot discuss it in matters of religion. They're negotiables in matters of religion to promote something, right? To promote something, to remain silent, to be fuzzy, to be hazy on something that attacks or negates or goes against or undermines something so critical as the first pillar. And the question of salvation, to me, that's absolutely poor leadership. You are not leaders anymore. These people are not leaders anymore. If they fail, the very simple issue, right? That at least make it very clear to the people, right? That there is a philosophy in these publications. You want to read everything about them. I used to read all the perennialist books. I knew who they were, right? I knew what their fitna was, right? I knew where they made mistakes. We all used to read their books. In my home, I have plenty of their books, right? But once it became as if this is another perspective or madhab, or no one wants to say anything for some political gain that they're getting, Allah knows best what political gains or what other back-end gains they're getting from remaining silent, they haven't elucidated. So when they go around speaking and saying, so many people are getting upset, and they don't want to say what's good about this or that, okay? Well, and we should take the good and leave the bad. In order to take the good and leave the bad, you have to tell people what the bad is first, right? They're playing themselves as if they're victims of haters, right? If you want to say the good, take the good and leave the bad, you got to express what the bad is and make it very crystal clear, right? Make it crystal clear. And I believe, scholarship, dawah, whatever we want to call this, you got to be clear. لَتُبَيِّنُنَّهُ لِلنَّاسِ. Allah says in the Quran very clearly, you have to be crystal clear. But yet some people of our supposed leadership, I mean, not my leaders, but they taking it as to be fuzzy, it's their strategy. And people have told me to be fuzzy and have double speak is beneficial according to their philosophy. They actually believe, that you could be fuzzy. So to me, the answer is no. Have they displayed good leadership? They've displayed an excellent example of what not to do.
I have a quick question just to recap so the listeners understand. So a perennialist basically believes that all religions are going to heaven, right?
Basically, they believe that the spiritual path within each of these faiths, right, is a route and an avenue to God, right?
Yes.
Go to any perennialist book and look at where the question of validity of religions comes into play, right? Validity of religions comes into play, and you will see a load of nonsense, okay? A load of nonsense surrounding this question and this issue. And ironically, the funny thing is you'll usually see in perennialist websites, literature, references to Christianity and
Yes.
Hinduism, right? And you won't find many references to Judaism, right? And the irony is, and I really respect these people, the Jews have none of it. They're not taking any of this, right? They're not playing this game. They're not playing this kumbaya game of theirs. And I was told back in 2002, 2003, that the Jews have been approached, certain Jewish scholars and stuff have been approached to try to, get into this thing. And they're having none of it, right? They're not having pluralism in their theology.
Don't you think that there is a much bigger problem at hand? It seems like it's just a symptom of a bigger problem at hand that is seeming to be the idea that I want to abrogate beliefs from the Quran in favor of what my feelings are or what my hearts are pushing, what my heart is leaning towards. There's a whole lot of different ideas that are popping up from liberalism and all these other different camps that are kind of popping up. And if you really study some of these core beliefs that they're holding, they're really just abrogating certain verses out of the Quran itself, and in terms of trying to fit Islam into a modern context. Do you feel the same way, or?
That's totally what's happening. And whenever religion has been weak, the alternate philosophy comes in and breathes down its neck, and the weak-minded of the ummah fall for this and try to bring this darkness together with the light. So in the past, that in Iraq, in Baghdad and Kufa and these places, the philosophers were huge, right? And a group of Muslims called the Mu'tazila, they took on this philosophy as their prism of truth, and then they tried to jam the Quran into it, right? And Islamic theology into that prism. And of course, they were rejected and refuted, and they no longer exist. You go on and you have the conquest of Islamic thought or at least in the Muslim world, in the Near East, what they call Near East, for a couple of centuries. Now you go and the Europeans come out with the quote unquote new knowledge, which is science. So around the 1900s, you'll find a lot of tafsirs, commentaries on the Quran, and things where you had modernists who are taking the quote unquote scientific truths that are out there in materialist science and applying that to the religion. So Isra and Mi'raj could not have been literal. It had to be a dream. Jinn do not really exist. They're merely another tribe, right? So on and so forth. Well, modernism is that truth is derived from science. Postmodernism now has come and upended science and said truth derives from whatever you want it to be, right? So truth derives from your whim. Whatever you want the truth to be, well, that's your truth, okay?
Exactly.
and this is basically the quote unquote, the liberal Muslim or what have you. He's basically, it's just lock, stock, and barrel, just repeating like parrots this perspective, and it comes on some blog once a week, once a month. Someone comes with some shock value and says, it's time to question this, it's time to question that.
It's a trend, it's very trendy. Yeah,
it's very trendy. But if you look at all it is, it's nothing other than someone who has read a lot of Huffington Post articles. Maybe they've been on Reddit for a long time or on Tumblr, and they saw something like that. They just took it and applied it to their religion, just like taking a cookie cutter and applying it to your dough. So the reason that people are doing this is because the population of the Ummah grew so fast, far faster than there were teachers, whether they be scholars or students of knowledge, were able to transmit to them what is the foundation of your religion. And ultimately, in the end, Muslim is becoming just merely an identity of whatever you want it to be.
Sure. Dr. Shadee, I've got a couple of clarified questions about the core concept of perennialism. Is this something that, number one, is this something that the Muslim founded? Like, how long has this ideology been around? Like, who founded it? And also, it sounds like, based upon if one reads, like, for example, like a simple primer of creed like Aqidah Tahawiyya, you could read into it that perennialism almost sounds like kufr, because you're allowing another path other than Islam to be a path of salvation. So can you comment on those points?
Yeah, it doesn't even, if it sounds like kufr and it reads like kufr, it's kufr. It is 110% kufr. And whoever doesn't believe in something, what we call daruriyat ad-din, like daruriyat has two conditions. It's explicit in the text, right? It's qat'i ad-dalala. That means the verbiage used in these many texts, verses and sound authenticated hadiths is so crystal clear it cannot have a second meaning. And number two, it's mutawatir. It's spread around the ummah so far and wide that any Muslim will know this fact. And this fact is the first pillar of Islam, right? If you want salvation, you need to say La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. Nothing else will be accepted, right? This is the first pillar of Islam, right? So it is kufr, and the one who adopts this, and I had previously been a little bit more cautious because I had looked into the matter deeply, but the one who adopts this belief is even outside of Islam, right? Like one of their folks tried to corner me and make himself a victim and say, oh, are you saying that I'm a kafir? I really wish I could have that moment back. I would have told him, look, in order to actually write a declaration on you per se, you're going to have to come to my office hours, right? I'm not going to do it on Twitter.
Make sure you charge him too.
And there's going to be a fee attached to that, okay? And we'll sit down and we'll do it the right way the judges used to do, right? Of explaining what is your belief, and this is the belief. Have you understood this belief properly? And are you still refusing this belief? Only problem, I can't jail you for 3 days, right? And then bring the jalad or whoever. But it is kufr. It's outside. You're outside of Islam, right? Someone who rejects something qat'i ad-dalala, explicit as evidence, explicit in the evidence, but is not mutawatir. This is what we call a bid'i. So he's a Muslim, but he's a bid'i. His deeds aren't accepted until he accepts his beliefs. So if you ask anyone, if you ask any scholar in the ages, throughout the ages, the rejecter of what is daruri in the religion, qat'i ad-dalala and mutawatir al-riwayah, right, is outside of Islam. And if he continues to make himself a Muslim, like prays with the Muslims, acts like he's a Muslim, talks like a Muslim, this is what they call a zindiq. A zindiq, someone whose beliefs are not Islam, but he's living as a Muslim. This is what they call a zindiq. So basically that it is 100% kufr. What was your other question?
The other question was like, who's the founder of perennialism? And does it come from the Muslims, or did it come from the other faiths and the Muslims just kind of, some of them just jumped on it?
Originally, this thing derives, some people say it derives from a couple Italian philosophers who drew on Platonic ideas, right? This is what some of them say. Others say
what's a Platonic idea?
India.
I'm sorry for my ignorance. What's a Platonic idea?
So Plato basically has this Plato has this concept that above everything is an ideal world Like, for example, there are chairs in this world. So there's a realm above us, right, where there is the ideal perfect chair, okay, that doesn't have any form. And then on this earth, there are a whole variety of chairs, basically, gotcha. Right? This is one of, and Aristotle rejected that. Aristotle was more of a materialist. He said, really? Show me one. Show me that world, right? In order to build a philosophy, he told his teacher, basically in summary, was show me where that world is. Otherwise, we can't base a philosophy on something that you're suggesting exists, but doesn't exist at all. So, but the other origin, of perennialism actually has to do with, India, right? And in India, they have a lot of, concepts, and that's why you'll find a lot of references in perennialist thought and perennialist stuff. There are a lot of Hindus involved, right? There is a lot of Indian stuff involved, and the perennialists. I mean, they're gonna parrot to you the same like 10 names. Kumaraswamy. I mean, I had Kumaraswamy coming out of my ears at GW, right? And this guy who no one ever reads anywhere else and no one's ever heard of. He's on every single, reading list in the Islam department at GW. Kumaraswamy. Then they have one guy from the, I guess he was a Catholic or I don't know, who knows what it was. But it's 5 names. It's like 5-6 names, and that's one of the signs of groups that aren't on truth is they only have like 5-6 representatives. And then when they come to Islam, they'll never cite the proof of their thing from the Quran. They'll cite a poem from Ibn Arabi or Rumi, right? And I loved that I came across the other day Ibn Arabi in one of his biographies. Okay, and I don't spread the teachings of Ibn Arabi because our teacher said that we have a good opinion of Ibn Arabi, but we don't read from him or spread his works because it could get confusing. But I was reading his biography, just his piety, what he used to do, and he goes, "We were in a gathering at someone's house, and a certain man was there, but he speaks suspect of him. He said, I suspected the purity of his creed." Right? If someone today says, don't listen to so-and-so because I suspect the purity of his creed.
That would be a red alarm.
Say, what are you, some kind of Wahhabi? Right? You're a Wahhabi. You're a Takfiri. Right. This is Ibn Arabi. Right? And then, furthermore, someone came up to him and said, he is a believer, right, in God, right? He believes in the unity of God, okay? What does he respond? He said, that's not what I'm worried about. I'm worried about his doctrines. That means belief in Allah Azza wa Jal, this isn't it. There are more doctrines than that, right? And there you go, the sheikh of everyone who wants to bring some bid'ah in the deen uses Ibn Arabi and Jalaluddin al-Rumi. Here's Ibn Arabi for you in purity of aqidah and purity of creed.
Now, is perennialism equivalent to like what people would call universalist religion, like all religions are the same, or is there some nuanced differences there?
Perennialism is universalism is very close, right? The modern way that perennialist idea got popularized is through what's called the Theosophical Society and Unitarian Universalism as well. Emerson was in this idea. Right, you remember Ralph Waldo Emerson, right?
The poet.
You remember that guy, right? From high school, sophomore year.
That was the guy that sat by the river or something in the forest.
Yeah, the guy who sat by the river, and then he went to jail. Right? He went to jail, and he was some great person or something. Okay, this is around like the 1900s, early 1900s or late 1800s. So he has that, but the perennialists are more into the spiritual element of things, right? And Frithjof Schuon, who is their leader. Right, Frithjof Schuon, I don't even think he died a Muslim. He died on Native American religion. And he actually didn't like, right, according to some, he didn't even like some of the Muslim perennialists because they were too Islamic, right? They were too Islamic. But Frithjof Schuon is a very shady character, who ended up, having lawsuits against him for, nude and sexual rituals with kids and ridiculous stuff like this, that you would never, want to go to Allah as your imam,
Right. So. Dr. Shadee, here at the Mad Mamluks, we're all about people who really take principled stances, and we appreciate you keeping it at 100 on this. you're known as one of the first people to really critique the study Quran when it came out, and you probably got a lot of flack from it, like from all these, random people or fanboys, etc. But recently, I come to know that Dr. Jibril Haddad had come out and also critiqued it pretty heavily, and it's starting to get some support. So, what kind of, I'm sure you have some relationships with some of these people who are involved in the study Quran. Have you spoken to them at all? Like, what's going on in their minds as far as the critiques and whatnot that are now coming its way?
Well, one of them, who, my teacher, Sheikh Sadiq, and also my teachers before that, they always said, you don't mention names except for a bid'i, an innovator. You can mention his name because of, warning people about them. But one of these leaders who really was someone I really respected, he called me up and tried to basically, in a nice way, silence me on the issue, right? He rang me up and had a conversation, and basically I said, look, the concept was, we all know that Zamakhshari, Zamakhshari's work, he's a Mu'tazili, right? But everyone uses his work, right? So he said, well, what about Zamakhshari? We use his work all the time. Okay. I said, yeah. But the ulama have made it so clear that he's a Mu'tazili and we don't accept that element of his work, right? And, number two, there is no fitna of anyone believing in Mu'tazili beliefs anymore, right? It's not a temptation anymore. So that's the reason.
And just for our listeners, Zamakhshari was a scholar that wrote a book called Al-Kashaf in Tafsir, very heavily dependent upon if you want to specialize in Tafsir. Even though he was Mu'tazili, if you want to specialize and become a specialist in Tafsir, especially the linguistic nature of the Quran, you have to, it's inevitable that you're going to study it.
Exactly. It's basically the language. He was very good at language. Yes. Okay. So, the conversation went as follows: that, okay, we all read Zamakhshari, right? And there are mistakes in every tafsir. I said, yes, but there's a big difference of supporting and encouraging people to a work without warning them of a doctrine that is in the work and is all over the work, right? All over the work, from the footnotes to the back essay, which has the perennialist, basically manifesto. Every verse that touches upon the issue of validity tells you to refer to that essay. Okay. So, that's how the conversation went. And then as soon as I said, look, you wanted me to be more kind about it. Maybe this is a East Coast thing. Like, we don't really mince words around here, but you want me to be more nice about it, right? Fine. I'll soften that language, but I'll soften that up. But you gotta make a statement, right? And then right after we were about to get, I'm getting some feedback. Are you guys getting feedback?
No feedback here.
Okay. So right when we were just about to come to a middle ground, he tried to work me again, and he said, "You know what? It's not really in there, is it?" I was like, "Yes, it's in there. It's all over the book. I pretty much went through the whole book in a weekend, right? Once you're in Islamic studies, you know where to look for the issues, right?
Right.
So I went through the book in a weekend, and it's all over the book. And then he just, okay, nice talking to you, assalamu alaikum. So that's the end of that, and that's the end of that relationship. But I'm telling you, I wouldn't have it any other. People ask me, would you have it any other way? I said, yeah, right? If I knew this was going to happen, if I had a crystal ball, I wouldn't have traveled that weekend and been on a plane, for 24 hours to Australia. I would have sat home, and I would have run the critiques, online one at a time with far more detail than I did. But I put the thing up, and then I traveled, and it's a 24-hour flight. I was without Wi-Fi for a whole, day and a half. And then I would have went harder, and I have no regrets. And all the people who are hating, fine, you can hate. I have no problem with that, And all the people who are, rescinding invitations and all that, I would do it again 100 times because it was the right thing to do. right? And it was honestly, it was an honor, that I was able to do something like that.
Very cool. So, in summary, the recommendation would be not to buy or study Quran. Was that would that be your safe recommendation?
Can you say slowly the title? What is it called?
It's just called Study Quran, right?
It's
Everyone
called
knows
Study Quran. No, just for our listeners, it's called Study Quran. Okay.
Yeah,
I wouldn't.
Go ahead.
I try not to stay in the business of telling people what to do, but I could tell you what the ruling is about things, And the ruling is that if you're not a person of knowledge, that you're like a student of knowledge, then you should not read books written by bid'ahs or that have heretical things inside of it, because you might not know what you're reading, right? You might imagine yourself to be immune, but you might not be. So that's someone who's seeking knowledge. I would seek knowledge from sources that you could trust 110%. And as for someone who does have knowledge, right, and does know things, then I would encourage them. Maybe you don't want to, raise their book prices up, book sales up, and contribute to that, but you probably should get educated on what is out there. So you probably should, read it if you're going to come across this issue, to see for yourself where the points are. I mean, there's one of the commentaries there says, it says that, it's sufficient to remain Jewish and Christian while respecting Muhammad, right? I mean, seriously, you got to be kidding. You got to be kidding if that's an Islamic doctrine. If that's an opinion. You want this to trickle down inside the homes of people and in the families. Then if you cast an aspersion, a doubt upon the requirement to believe in the Prophet, then you will not, with any conviction, fulfill any of the obligations of the religion, the actions that you have to do, like getting up for Fajr, like lowering your gaze, like not listening to music, like all these difficult obligations that a Muslim has to do. If you don't have absolute certainty in the aqidah, in the beliefs, then you will not have absolute certainty and the strength needed to actually fulfill the rites and rituals and obligations and prohibitions. So that's the fear. And we already had a guy who I actually knew from England. He became a apprentice, then he became a Christian, right? Right. And I would say for sure 100% this concept of the Sophia Perennis, right, the perennial philosophy, had to do with that. There's no doubt in my mind that it had to do with that. He became a Catholic, right? And then, of course, all the Muslims, were just sort of, the backbone is just gone from a lot of people. And you had people congratulating him. Whatever you think is right, the complete postmodern approach to things.
Yeah,
sure. The last question about, actually, I don't think Sim had something too, but as a group, like the Qadianis, their asl is kufr, right? Well, yeah. I think the Mu'tazilites, the people, the Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah at that time did not consider them to be kuffar. They call them our misguided brothers. Is is a perennialist in their asl? Are they disbelievers, or have we not gone that far yet? What's the ruling on them as a group?
It's very simple. Well, I'll talk about the belief, right? Any individual who believes that Allah Azza wa Jal and the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam did not obligate explicit and open belief in him and in his messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, okay? And the followership, that the deen, the way you worship and believe and practice, okay, be other than Islam. If you believe that God did not obligate this, that Allah did not obligate this, then the Prophet ﷺ did not obligate this, that person is not a Muslim, period. It doesn't matter if they wear a turban, it doesn't matter if they grow a beard, carry beads, read Ibn Arabi, do a hadra, jump up and down, write 50 Islamic books. If you do not believe that Allah and His Messenger obligated the first pillar in Islam. Hello, we're talking about the first pillar. I can't believe we're even having this discussion.
Yeah.
It's the first pillar in Islam. If you don't believe that is wajib, obligatory, no questions asked, okay, that if that offer comes to you and you reject that offer and choose something else, as the Quran says, right? And they wish to take this as a path. يُفَرِّقُونَ بَيْنَ رُسُلِهِ, right? Separate between His prophets. يُؤْمِنُونَ بِبَعْض وَيَكْفُرُونَ بِبَعْض, right? وَيُرِيدُونَ أَن يَتَّخِذُوا بَيْنَ ذَلِكَ سَبِيلًا. أولئك هم الكافرون حقا. These people are not Muslims to begin with. Okay? And I guarantee you, 110%, this statement that I just made, you will not find any Islamic student of knowledge, even. You will not find a Muslim mechanic, right, who doesn't know this, or a scholar that disagrees with it.
Well, why do we, in our leadership community and the greater Muslim community, at least in the West, why do we have such a difficult time addressing something so clear? Now, here at the Mad Mamluks, we always try to bring people together beyond, some of the divides that we have in our community. And someone might be listening to this and say, like, oh, this is a very shocking language that we're hearing at the Mad Mamluks. But this is what we're trying to explain to people, that yes, we want to bring unity, but we also want people to understand that there are some definite red lines where you are not part of the Jama'ah of Muslims, the greater body of Muslims, and it's not unity when you're bringing them in to the big body of Muslims, I guess.
Okay.
But
look.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, look. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. Right? Allah says, hold on to the rope of Allah all together and do not separate. Okay? So what is the prerequisite of the word all together? Jami'an. Right? You're talking about unity, right? And we want to bring the Muslims together. And it's well known in Islam, the great virtue, right, of bringing the Muslims together, right? But look what Allah Azza wa Jal says. He says, hold on to the rope of Allah all together and do not separate. So what's the prerequisite? Hold on to the rope of Allah Azza wa Jal. Okay? That means, this is in Ali Imran, Surah Ali Imran. That means the prerequisite of unity is accuracy in religion, right? And we're not saying one madhab over another. We are not saying and making a big fuss or making division on a matter that has been discussed and is debatable. We are making a statement on a matter that has zero possibility of being an opinion in Islam.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Zero possibility.
Dr. Shadee, how do you speak so plainly in terms of not being held back by anything like, being the head of a mosque and whatnot, and all these other, being a leader in your community? Sometimes you have to, couch your language and not be able to offend anyone. And you've said earlier in this podcast how the leadership is kind of not talking about some of these more important things. And I know Sheikh Amir and some of his students who went to study with him in Egypt and in India, when they came back to this country, they didn't want to hold a lot of these leadership positions because they felt like they're going to be restrained and they won't be able to talk about what they want to talk about. So now we have the learned people who actually are willing to speak plainly. They're no longer heads of mosques because they're not able to speak freely anymore.
That's true. And the answer to that question is that I've been blessed by Allah to have great people in this community who know the truth. They're learned. They've sat in my classes. They sit in my classes regularly. They take the classes regularly, and they give me feedback. They give me feedback. Sometimes they tell me, look, you can say your position, but so we're not slinging mud at any individuals. We're simply stating a belief that no two Muslims can disagree on, right? And honestly, if a masjid will fire you for saying that, then be fired. Yeah. You're better off elsewhere. You're better off, pumping gas than to mince words on a daruri, a fundamental of your trade and your discipline and your religion. So, but that's the answer. The answer is the only way I could do this is because the people I have been blessed with in the masjid are from the best people that I've ever come across, to be quite honest with you. And honestly, all you have to worry is that you could say the same thing plainly without having to attack individuals. You know?
Attack the ideas, right?
Yeah, you attack the ideas. And some people's performance and leadership has been atrocious. But again, you just say that generally, that when someone does this and this and this, then your leadership is atrocious and you're not a leader, and, I'm better off following someone else.
Right.
And then when it comes to the national stuff, that's where people get corrupted. Yeah. People get corrupted from hobnobbing at all these conferences and then getting invited and then getting a nice handsome honorarium and then buying a house based on these honorariums. Then you got to pay the mortgage based on these honorariums. Then all of a sudden, in the end of the day, you're just doing a kumbaya operation to pay your bills. That's all you are anymore. You're just an image, a shell of your former self, And I personally don't like to live like that. I also don't like to travel too much, so I don't want to live that lifestyle. I like to live, just a simple lifestyle. I could do this stuff online, but I don't have to go around hobnobbing and faking it. And, you hate some idea, then the representative of that idea is next to you in some conference. And you're like, oh, assalamu alaikum. It's so nice to see you. And you're both munafiqs, You're both just smiling with your teeth,
I love you so much right now. Do you understand?
Why don't you
This is what we're all about. This is what the Mad Mamluks have. We kind of are tired of this whole culture that we've kind of built up where, everyone's out there just to kind of, it's a promotion type of a thing, It's all a promo. I'm telling you, it's all a humongous promo. And that's why a lot of people are seeing that the conference is, look, just call it a Muslim networking operation, and nobody can criticize you, right? These conferences that have totally lost their vision. They have no vision anymore, right? Whatever vision statement there ever was in the past, it's been trampled on and destroyed. Most of these conferences are like that. Not all of them, but most of them. And, if you just call it a Muslim networking conference, it's far more fair. No one will criticize you. But don't say, this is, learning the deen or whatever it is. Just call it a networking conference.
But I think in all fairness, I think a lot of it has to do with, being understanding towards knowing that people or in your surrounding, in your environment, they've been indoctrinated in a certain way. And you kind of have to hold them by the hand. In the process of holding them by the hand is, seeing the process that they're going through and, catering to that. And to me personally, I think, as a shepherd, as somebody, as all Muslims see themselves as a shepherd in their own way, as the hadith of Rasulullah mentions, that we, in the way I think it's supposed to be looked at, is that everyone is responsible for a certain type of people, right? And what they're responsible, they're forgiving in a way, but I understand your point that you have to, if something is getting out of control and the dururiyat of the deen are being, misconstrued, then you have to bring awareness on about that, right? And you have to make sure you do whatever you can to raise awareness. But I think that you're going to find a lot of these conferences, you will find scholars there, but they have a vision for the people, and they know that things are going to get even worse than they are now. Now, we can make a decision. Either we can, and I'm not talking about you directly, I'm not talking about anybody here. I'm just saying that if we can make a decision, either we can talk about it negatively, which we have the right to do so, or, and I'm not saying, don't criticize. Criticism and being negative are two different things in my book. But we have to see that everyone comes from a different background, and I think then our adab and our akhlaq and the way our relationship with Allah is going to start shining then the way we see these individuals, right? And I know it was kind of funny, someone was saying, these guys are looking at each other and they're both munafiqs. But I think somebody who's responsible for a community, they may not see it that way. They may see that look at the ideological warfare that's been done to the ummah now. And these poor individuals have just been broken, and they don't even realize they're broken. I realize they're broken. So what is my mannerisms going to be towards them? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
So
I see what you're saying.
But obviously, the reason why we have you on is because you say things the way they are.
Yeah, and there's different approaches you could, like Dr. Tariq Ramadan, he boycotted RIS and ISNA for a couple years, just because they were like, yeah, and there's not, there's Muslims dying across the globe, and y'all ain't doing nothing about it. Y'all ain't talking about that.
Oh, I didn't know about that.
Dr. Tariq Ramadan boycotted ISNA and RIS. It was like a couple years ago.
He's the guy who always has a principled stand on things, agree or disagree, but he's a guy who I actually respect. I actually respect most of that you will find who lean towards Sufism, right? Okay. Most of the people who are Sufi oriented, it's really ashamed to say, is very few of them that you could say this guy is a man who has a principled belief and he's taking hits and he's moving on with life. I'm telling you, it's a very sad thing. It makes me really upset because I believe that teaching, what Imam al-Ghazali wrote, what, Abu Madian, Abu Ya'za al-Nur, these older ulama, what they were upon, that this is true, right? Ibrahim bin Adham, that these teachings, this is what's true. That's my belief, right? But when I look today and I'm looking for my leadership, to have that type of person who is, powerful and who is able to be a defender and clarify the truth to people who are just looking for someone to say, what the truth is, right, about a matter. Unfortunately, I find this softness is coming at the expense. Okay, you have the best adab, you're the nicest people, okay, you are the nicest people, there's no doubt about that. However, is it coming at the defense of clarity or at the expense of clarity? What I'm saying. That's what I feel is happening. It's coming at the expense of clarity. So if you're saying yes, there needs to be people shaking hands, talking, having discussions, I have no problem with that, right? I would have no problem with that if it didn't come at the expense, right, of clarity in matters of deen, right? And the vagueness is, I'm not the only one who says it. Trust me. From within our circles, right? There have been many students of knowledge from quote unquote traditional Islam, okay, who are saying, dude, I was with one of the leaders actually, driving him to the airport at one point. And I said, what do you think is the problem, right? And he says, accommodationism. We accommodate so much that he told me that that one day I looked out to the audience and I couldn't even identify what this audience was. Like he has students, right? He looked out, I couldn't even identify what this audience was. There's no one, doing what we call islah. Islah means there's something wrong happening here. You're doing something wrong. You need to correct it. So if you see everyone doing something wrong, you need to say something. You could say it in a gentle way. Some people have different manners than others, whatever, but you got to say something, right? Like, look, you're not going to go to a Salafi organization or a Salafi masjid or a Salafi class, right? And you're not going to see some kind of munkar, like skin-tight jeans or people, doing whatever. You're not going to find this perpetuated. It's going to be handled. One of the mashayikh at some point or other, he'll discuss it. He said, look, it looks like some people in our jama'ah, they do this or that, right? And it's not really the right thing to do, right? And we need to cut it out. Cut it out right now. Or cut it out of our community right now. So they come with strong language and they get the job done and people love them more because you're teaching me. You're educating me. You're stopping me where my nafs is out of control a little bit. You helped me. Sayyidina Ali bin Abi Talib said a person loves the one who teaches him, right? But you find accommodationism. Accommodationism is like, okay, like we don't want to turn them away. We don't want to turn them away. We don't want to turn anyone away. Who said that they're coming not to be taught? People go to religion so that they could get somewhere better than they are, right? Not to be told that they're already okay. So this is my critique of the thing, and this is why I personally find that what you're saying is fine. I have no problem with all that stuff, right? But I feel that maybe it's coming at the expense, not maybe, it is coming at the expense of clarity in matters of religion. Allah Adam, that's just my opinion. That's a subjective matter.
Right.
So that's what I feel.
That's a very astute observation, actually, because I remember when we, especially Al Maghrib, I volunteered for Al Maghrib for like 12 years. I just recently told them I'm done. You need to let some young kids run it now. Just because I'm like 35 and kid and all that stuff and work. Go to 20-year-olds run it when you're at university. But I remember they have a concept called Qibla. And what that is like, if a sister's asking a question, the brothers don't look to see who's asking.
Okay.
And that's laid out in the ground rules on like day one. Whereas at some other organizations where you have like maybe mashayikh from the traditional Islamic sphere speaking,
they would never say something.
Not only that, it's like you're going there to meet, to pick up chicks. I mean, I'm serious. Like that's what it's about, And
because there's permissiveness in the name of adab. That's what it is.
Right. We don't want to turn anyone away. They might, and Sheikh Hamza Maqbul and I were talking about this past weekend. Is like how like one of the elder mashayikh of the tradition here in the U.S. He has a lot of murids, but sometimes you see like some of these murids who have been like, for example, female, even sisters, right? They've been murids for a few years, and they don't even wear hijab. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. How are you going to be like someone?
Make any sense?
Yeah. How you going to be a student of tasawwuf? Like you're supposed to be spiritually developing, and you've been with the sheikh for like years, and there's no hijab, and then you know what I mean. So like,
there's no islah, and this is a whole phenomenon now because it's in parenting too. Like you've seen these shows or something where they make fun of modern parents where. Johnny is scribbling on the wall with permanent marker, and then the grandpa says, "You cut that out, boy," right? And then the mom says, "No, we don't say no to Johnny." It's like it's a phenomenon that if you tell someone what to do, or you advise them to do or not do something that might take effort, that you've offended him, or he's going to run away from home. He's that fragile, right? He's just completely fragile. And my answer to that is, if you come to a gym and the guy says, get down and do 20 push-ups, and you say, is anyone going to say, that's offensive, don't ask me to do that, put some less weight on the bar so I could come to your gym. Then the gym instructor is useless. He's useless. And I'm telling you, they got the psychology all wrong. If someone is going to religion, he's going to change. He wants to change. He wants to improve, right? They want to improve. So if I'm not benefiting because you think I'm too sensitive, then we have a problem. This is not going to continue. And mark my word, most of these relationships, the person doesn't advance given 10 or 20 years. They just leave it because it hasn't improved them. It hasn't changed them. It hasn't benefited them. And that's my fear about the next wave that's coming upon us. If we continue to succumb to every whim, right, and our Islam is just becoming an identity, okay, then the next generation, why should they keep up that identity? In the same way that why should an Italian kid growing up in America, why should he continue to learn Italian and learn how to do these Italian things?
Being Muslim is becoming a culture, basically.
It's becoming a culture. So the next question is, why even say that you're Muslim when it's politically not? It's not going to enhance your career. It's going to decrease it, right? Why even continue, forging forward? Yeah. If you have taken away at every turn where there's tension, you find a fatwa.
Sure,
right?
You're right. And as someone who studied this traditional science from these traditional ulama, at what point did you kind of like come to this epiphany that like, because most people, like, again, from your background, aren't come to this realization, let alone even speaking about it. At what point did you have this epiphany that like, this is messed up and I got to say something about it, even though some of the elders in the community, may be silent about it? Like, like I think you may have alluded to this because I asked my wife, I was talking to my wife the other day. I was like, we have in a podcast with Dr. Shadee al-Masry, and she'd referred to, I think Sheikh Yasser Qadi shared your post. Essentially, it was like comparing like neo-Sufism versus the traditional orthodoxy. And, and again, some people will say, like, for example, if you want true tasawwuf, like, for example, a good example would be like Sheikh Nuh. He's got like, his people are like disciplined, they're progressing. Like, a sister can't even, I don't think they even think they can go to his majlis in America without niqab. I think I saw that. So like, when did you come to this realization yourself, through your studies?
All of the teachers that I studied with, they were all had wara, they had fear of falling into haram. They eschewed, they didn't like fame and popularity and glitter and glitz, even if they were famous, right? They didn't live that life, right? they all were away from power. Like they did not ever cross their mind that they would be the state mufti or the pet sheikh of some dictator or tyrant, right? They hated those people, right? They called them Sheikh al-Sulta, right? The sheikh of the leadership, right? They hated that. And they had no tolerance for modernists of their time, the modernists of their age, the secularists of their age. They had no tolerance for this. Now, in America, the scene, we're like the frog in boiling water. The temperature kept rising very slowly, right? The standard kept going down very slowly, that it's unrecognizable, right? That it's not recognizable. And the beauty of community and family is that Allah chooses your family, you don't choose your family, right? And some people in your family will never find everyone on the same belief, right?
True.
You know? So in family, if I'm going to credit anything, I have to say that my dad was always critical of this group, right? Of the Sufis and the traditional Islam would have, right? Of course, someone like Sheikh Sayyid Ramadan al-Bulti, you can never criticize. His theology is he never has any shortcuts in his theology. So we respected those originals, those people from, the original mashayikh of the last generation. But the current ones, he was always critical and never let me stop hearing it, to the point that I said, you know what? I think there's some truth to this, right? There's some truth to this. And
if I can interrupt you for a second, some people found Sheikh Ramadan Bhuti's relationship with the Syrian government a little bit troubling. Did you find that same thing?
Yeah, that's at the end. That was something very unfortunate, and I can't say that we hold that up, right? We can't support that. I can't say we support that. It's unfortunate, and anyone who
but he had a lifetime of achievement, basically, is what you're trying to say. Is that it doesn't mean that it takes away from everything, all the amazing things that he's done, but that there is that small blemish that sometimes every human is susceptible to.
Yeah, I'll say, unlike the fanboys of this fanboy culture that you alluded to, that they don't want to say anything, right?
Right.
No, you could say that this is something that many mashayikh in Syria were very regretful, and that this is not the right thing to do, right? To support the man, to stand by him, Assad, is not the right thing to do. According to that's what that many of the mashayikh said, and so it's not like one person making some shock statement. No, it was out there. Everyone was saying that, right? But now that we've said it, now we could say, well, we take the good and we leave what else with the rest, right?
Right.
These fanboys, what they do is they won't even recognize the wrong, right?
Right.
And they will say, he's a Sufi sheikh. Maybe he has a vision from the Prophet told him to do this. Maybe he has a kashf. And this is all absurdity and misguidance.
And that's what, when I was studying Sufism, that it turned me away. And I wish I met someone like you who kind of clarified all this stuff in my younger years, when I was trying to sort things out, and some of the abuse that people used in terms of dreams and some of the mystical aspects of Sufism, and tried to divert crowds. There was always this one example one of my teachers taught me. There was a Sufi sheikh who would, he would tell a gathering of Muslims to make a cup in their hand and put the cup near their ear and have them hear the rivers of Jannah, speaking to them. Obviously, it's the same sound as a shell, right? Yeah. So some of these type of silly beliefs kind of permeated people who are trying to explore Sufism, and kind of dissuaded them from actually learning it at all.
Yeah, and the first rule in Tasawwuf is that your beliefs and the way in which you worship Allah Azza wa Jal and draw near to Him and draw to wilayah, which is the goal of Tasawwuf, is to get you to be the perfect, have kamal al-ubudiyya lillah, perfect servanthood to Allah Azza wa Jal, right? Which you can also call wilaya. The only way to that is how Allah Azza wa Jal has commanded, right? It's tawqifi. It's not from yourself. So all of our outward actions have to be in accord with Sharia, right? This is the first rule of tasawwuf that some people have lost, but this is the first rule of tasawwuf. We do not make rules or derive anything, right, that will contradict Sharia from visions, right? If that's the case, then your vision is a test. Allah's testing you with that vision, right? Okay. So I believe honestly that this softness, this permissiveness, this looseness, this lack of clarity when it comes to in that we've been talking about, I actually think it's going to eventually go away. The next generation of youth, young scholars, right, that I've seen that are like my colleagues, right? Honestly, we all see the same thing. They see it too, right? And they don't want to have anything to do with it. So if there's people out there, listen, the future, right, is actually, to me, I think it's actually very bright. There are a lot of young students of knowledge, young sheikhs out there. All of them, none of them like any of this fuzziness in the deen or these things, you know. So it's not just me who sees it. All of us see it, and all of us. Eventually, you have half a dozen, 24 young imams. We don't need superstars and celebrities. You have your community, and you're teaching them and educating them, and there's a network that develops, and that's what's happening. A network of people is developing. What's bonding these networks is we don't like BS, right? Yeah. There's just the BS is so obvious, right? And no one likes it, right? Everyone's sick of it. So that's basically why I think in the future there's going to be a lot of people who are clear on the deen, and they're not accepting this postmodern stuff, nor the corruption of being allied with dictators or being soft on heretics and bid'ah and all these things.
Dr. Shadee, for someone we talked about tasawwuf a little bit already, for someone who's interested in pursuing tasawwuf, do you have any recommendations? Like, a lot of questions enter one's mind, like, can I just do it myself? Do I just do some adhkar? Do I need a sheikh? Like, what would be your advice to someone who is exploring that subject for the first time?
The correct way to do anything is, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask those who know. Ahl al-dhikr means someone who is constantly reviewing the matter, meaning the experts in that matter, if you don't know. And specifically about Allah, Ar-Rahman, فَاسْأَلْ بِهِ خَبِيرًا. The most merciful, ask someone who knows, right? So, if you want to draw near to Allah Azza wa Jal, and you want to tap into some level of iman and submission that is higher and more superior and refined than the level that we're at right now, the way in which we do it is that we act upon what we already know, with the intention and the hope that Allah Azza wa Jal will deliver us and make clear to us the individual or individuals from whom we can benefit from, which we call this suhbah. Suhbah is good companionship, right? Good companionship can be from someone who is a master. It could be from someone who knows a little bit more than us or a lot more than us, right? So the way we go forward is, you have knowledge. We all have some knowledge. Act upon it. You have teachers that you trust, right? Teachers who have teachers. Allah says in Surah Yusuf, فَوْقَ كُلِّ ذِي عِلْمٍ عَلِيمٍ. Above every one of knowledge is someone else, someone of greater knowledge. So what does that teach us? The first criterion of a scholar is that he has teachers, right? This ayah is oftentimes viewed as humility, like if you think you know, then someone knows more. But Allah says, وَفَوْقَ كُلِّ ذِي عِلْمٍ. Above every teacher is a teacher who knows more, right? That means the criterion of a sheikh is that he has a sheikh, and his sheikh has to be a living sheikh, right? Not some sheikh from a dream, right? You have great dreams of people, excellent. We believe in dreams. We believe in karamat of the awliya. We believe in all that, but you need a sheikh, right? A teacher who is in this world, not, in some jungle that we can't really know if he really exists even. No. a real sheikh that educates you and teaches you, right? That's one of the criterions of a scholar and a pious person of tasawwuf. So we say, we worship, praying that Allah accepts our worship, and He will make clear to us from whom we could take benefit, and then you'll know. People say, how do I know who to take as a sheikh? Usually I say, look, how do you find a best friend? Right? You can't go and say, you know what, today I'm going to wake up and look for a best friend, right? It just happens, right? So we know what the criterion are. We worship Allah, and Allah Azza wa Jal will give us this person to benefit from. Even there's an attribution, some say it's a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that if you are at the top of a mountain and Allah found you worthy of receiving guidance, He will send you a teacher, right? So that's my advice in a nutshell.
Right. And I have another kind of related question to this whole pursuit of knowledge that we're on the subject of right now. In your Safina Society podcast, you mentioned that there are very few people who you would probably classify as scholars, at least in the Western sphere, especially when we're talking about establishing Western scholarship. What's the criterion for, and I come from a background that we talked about before the podcast where, I don't know if you remember Brother Abu Uwais rahimahullah, if you ever heard of him. He used to be the Imam, I think, of Masjid Rahma back in like the late 90s. He had a tape back in the day called There Are No Scholars in the West, and this is from the Salafi perspective. Mm-hmm. But that I used to really like buy into that. I would never call, even people would call people sheikh, I would always call them stud. I was very particular about that kind of stuff. Yeah. And and then you become very loose when like, everyone's a scholar. So what in traditional Islam, and I always thought that as long as I figured if you had a certain amount of ijazats and certain texts, that's what was be required, or if you had a degree from, let's say, Azhar Sharif or Nadwat al-Ulama, etc., or whatever institute, you'd be considered a scholar. What's the criteria we should employ to identify scholars versus students of knowledge, at least here in the West?
I would give it a simple criterion. Instead of saying so-and-so is a scholar and worrying about the person, I would look at the question. The word that they're saying at that moment, or their fatwa their answer to the question, and ask the simple question of, from where is that particular statement coming from? Like, who educated you in this particular subject that you are now feel the liberty of speaking about it? So. Because the knowledge is so vast, right? A person could know so much about Aqeedah, but not so much about ulum al-qira'at. Qira'at in tajweed, you have qira'at, right? So I would actually pin it and try to be more specific and say, you're teaching a class on Aqeedah. Okay, can you please, kindly with respect, inform us all of who has given you the license and the permission, right, to give this class, like who has educated you in this class, right? And this is how we do it, right? So that's one way to do it, such that it's hard to say what is a scholar and who is not, but it's easy to say in this specific matter, are you speaking with knowledge or not? Have you taken lessons on this subject? And from whom? And nobody should not say who they took their knowledge from. When I give my classes, you got your halaqah, which is just wa'adh. Wa'adh is just reminders of things. But when we have the official classes, I always say, and I repeat in the class, this class is from this book, has been taught to me by this sheikh, and he has given me permission to teach it. That means he's confirmed my understanding of it. And if you want to go back to him, you can go back to him and ask him, right? Did you allow Shadee al-Masry to speak on this subject, right? And unfortunately, actually, I wish that I would have to actually get it in writing, because sometimes sheikhs, they forget they have so many students, right? I wish that I actually would get it in writing, just in any way, shape, or form, or recorded, so that if someone, has doubt, you go back to him. So, does this answer your question? Like, I would go back to the specific thing that they're teaching and see if they had permission, because a person could know something very well, but they might not know something else. So they wouldn't be deemed a scholar per se. But in this matter, they are speaking legitimately.
Right. So, like, for example, like, just maybe to clarify the point, some, like, in Chicago, we have some scholars who are considered to be sheikhs of tasawwuf, right? Because their sheikh gave them they have khilafa, right? That's what they said. But then they said that they wouldn't be an alim of aqidah or fiqh, right? They would be a student. Is that, so we're almost in like a specialist age for the most part? Is that what you're kind of, or is that just the gist of it? Like, people will just be, they could be a scholar in aqidah or fiqh or hadith, but maybe a student in something else. Depends on the text and what they studied and who they studied from.
Well, yeah, there definitely there's specialists, right? Like, there's specialists. Like, we know that in, for example, you have an Aqidah, Sheikh Saeed Foda is one of the biggest, in the traditional Ash'ari Aqidah. He's one of the biggest specialists in that, right? So, is he a specialist in tafsir of Quran? I'm sure he can give an excellent tafsir, but he wouldn't be, I don't think people have called him the Sheikh of tafsir. So, there's definitely specialists. And there have always been specialists, right, if you think about it. But the one example you gave, though, a sheikh of tasawwuf, actually, the ulama always used to consider he has got to be a scholar in aqidah. There is no question about that. You have to be a scholar in aqidah, and you need to know, a lot of fiqh. Right? Because that's one thing did you know that in the past, in the tariqas of the past, that you couldn't be a sheikh of a tariqa in Egypt unless you were an Azhari, and the British snakes, they saw this connection. They saw that who are the people going to? The people love their Sufi sheikhs, right? And the Sufi sheikhs are all Azhari scholars. Therefore, the power is with the scholars, and the scholars are smart enough to avoid our traps. So what did the British do? The British got really smart, and they said, you know what? We're making a new law here. You don't have to be a sheikh of Azhar in order to run a tariqah. Okay? And so now all of a sudden, every Tom, Dick, and Harry who wanted to open a tariqah, they encouraged him to open up a tariqah and have public gatherings and whatnot, whereas that was outlawed before. You couldn't have public dhikrs. You could not do public irshad, okay, in public if you weren't an Azhari scholar. So they broke that. Okay, so the one example so there are specialists, but I really can't see how a sheikh of spirituality who's basically is saying that he can deliver you to teach you how to please Allah. I think he needs to be a sheikh of aqidah and fiqh. He needs to know that, right? So that's the one example that I would say certain specialties require other specialties. You can't be a specialist in usul al-fiqh except for sure you are like near mastery of the Arabic language, right?
You had mentioned, yeah, of course. You mentioned something interesting, the word tariqah, and that word is not, in our time, not used very often. And some scholars of the past historically believed that the tariqah was originally formed. The purpose of the tariqah was originally formed for the sake of strengthening those individuals solely for the purpose in the battlefield, for instance, right, during jihad. And obviously it has its own context, and we're all mature and we understand that there's context for everything, right? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions jihad in the Quran, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. For instance, Sayyid Hawa, he wrote a book about tazkiyat al-nafs, and he was talking about tariqah, and he mentioned in there, and obviously times change, but he was mentioning that tariqahs were originally formed historically not for people to be complacent, but rather for the special forces of who are protecting the ummah. You know what I'm saying? So I think that we don't get a chance again to talk about these things anymore. And we talked about a lot of cool stuff. And just to comment, you mentioned something very cool about when you were talking about that thing that Maghrib had the concept of qibla, right? You look, and you mentioned something about you said permissive adab or something.
Yeah, adab it's like this. In the quote unquote Salafi circles, right?
Mm-hmm.
The most commonly used and probably overused and misused word that's used to, beat up on heretics, and sometimes people who aren't heretics, but you think they're heretics, is bid'ah, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the word is just, if you had, these blog things where they make the word big the more it's used on the blog.
Yeah.
You ever seen that thing?
Yeah.
Right? That bid'ah would be like on 72 font, right? 72 point font. Okay.
Or underlined, in the books, underlined.
Yeah, underlined, bolded, capitalized. Whereas in contrast, in the quote unquote Sufi circles, contemporarily at least, I think, personally speaking, just my opinion, my observation, it's the word adab as a justification for shutting up and not saying anything about anyone that you respect, right? So you notice that you can diss anyone that you want, right? But once you come upon the people that I like, now you're not having adab, right? You're not having adab now. So now adab is pulled out. The word adab is pulled out, or the call for manners. Have some adab with the mashayikh, right? That's because I said something about the sheikh that you don't like. But we just finished a conversation, half hour of, how misguided and how messed up is so-and-so, right? So this concept of adab is used for that reason, to shut people up. The second reason it's used is, it's like, I would say you're weak, right? And to justify your weakness in forbidding wrong or doing islah is sometimes covered up by saying adab, right? We want to have adab with these people, right? So it's really sort of a justification for why I really can't do islah. And I feel that that's, obviously I'm generalizing here, but that's my observation. And so what becomes the norm is that it's permissive,
Yes.
The environment is permississive, nobody wants to ever say Islam has rules. Islam has rules. You go to a 5-star restaurant, there are rules. You go to the opera. You know how many rules there are in the opera? Right?
Yeah.
If you go to Italy, you go to the opera, right? You go to a play in Manhattan, okay, to the one of these theaters in the theater district. There's a big guy that's going to come out, okay, with a big voice in the auditorium, and he's going to list a bunch of rules, right? He's going to list a bunch of rules. And if you break one of these rules, you're out. You're not getting a refund. They don't care what you think. They don't care if you're going to go online and put a negative response, a negative review. And I'm telling you, Salafi Muslims in the past, 100 years, I'm telling you, in my opinion, even though I think that they're wrong on so many things, okay, and they're not the best examples on many, many things, but I have to give credit where it's due. They care a lot about doing this thing right. And they care more about doing the deen right, okay, than about, what people would think of them.
Mm-hmm.
They care far more, and they've gotten more success, okay? They've gotten more success because they care about doing the thing right, and they're respectable for that reason. Okay, even though, forget the theological, but look at the effort that they're putting in, right? So that's what I believe personally, and I believe that this permissiveness in the culture of Sufi groups, right, is why that it's not producing the results that are desired.
And we are going to be approaching our final theme, inshallah, and thank you very much for that clarification. Awesome clarification, very detailed. We got election day coming up, and election time is to vote in the sovereign entity and the head of the state. So many message boards, Facebook, different venues are talking about the permissibility of voting in Islam in in an entity that's not an Islamic sovereign entity, for instance. And that's how some look at it. Some look at it as, we have to bring in somebody that can bring benefit to the Muslims, rightfully so. They have the right to feel that way, obviously. How, as a Muslim, should we look and even approach this topic if we believe that Islam, number one, has a solution for everything, and number two, we have to look at everything with the lens of the Quran and the Sunnah. So obviously there is something in the Sharia that can elude us to understand the topic of elections living in a non-Muslim country.
Right, and this show will release after the election tomorrow, but it obviously pops up every year.
It'll be a nice afterburner.
I think on this subject that if someone thinks that the situation of the Ummah will get better by putting someone in office, then you totally have, totally missed the boat a long time ago. Because the success of the Muslims in general, any community, big or small, their success comes from the relationship with Allah Azza wa Jal, not from putting someone in office or outside. But if they're talking about, certain issues, right? One or two issues, then we can have a discussion. So,
what if someone says, and I'm going to play devil's advocate here. What if somebody says, we have to obviously depend on Allah, but we have to take with the asbab, the means that Allah has given us, we have to put our trust in Allah. And this is all we have available. All of us in America, we only have two of these very, very competent individuals to run our country. So we have to choose one.
Yeah. So
right. Not just have to. There's organizations now who are saying that it is a fard.
Yes.
That you have to do this.
Well, okay.
I like you prefacing it with that chuckle. So go ahead.
I mean, to get out the vote. I mean, I know that's the politically correct thing to say is get out the vote, and everyone got out the vote. I personally feel that I've never really gotten into the fiqh of it, because the fiqh of it is that we do always have the concept of the lesser of two evils, right? Mm-hmm. You have the concept of the lesser of two evils, and there shouldn't be. I think the only fiqh of it comes, which really almost aqidah, is that do people feel that this is the correct system? Should we apply these laws? But the point is that there is a concept of lesser of two evils, and to be honest with you, even if in the concept of lesser of two evils, you don't really know in this election who is the lesser of two evils from one aspect. Obviously, Trump he's got a whole laundry list, but at the same time, he is speaking of, some pulling back a lot of the military stuff, right? From the Muslims, for pulling back the armies, from abroad, right? You do see that coming from him. So that might be a benefit to them. Whereas, obviously, on the inside, it's not going to be very nice.
One thing
Hillary's the opposite. She's very, very friendly with, our folk and our community, but probably will continue the sprawl that her husband started, that the military is everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Honestly, I'm not a political analyst. The subject bores me. Should we vote or should we not? I think the subject is boring to me.
Gotcha.
And,
no, that's good, man. I appreciate your honesty. No, that's cool, man. I appreciate your honesty, because I think there's a few things that are on people's minds, and a few realities that have to be understood too. Is number one, I personally feel that with the lesser of the two evils, that people they kind of misuse it. I'm not saying yourself, but I see everybody using that for things that are even somewhat of a luxury too, and it's supposed to be used for something that when maybe under coercion or something that you have to make a decision. And if you do, then you choose the lesser of the two evils, right? But people use that. And if you were to understand how political Washington really is and how it's run, majority of people know, and there's a flip side to it. Majority of people know that their votes are not, or a lot of people know that their votes are not going to make, it's not the thing that's going to make the big difference.
Yeah.
But rather, if the type of person that's going to be empowered through that vote. Like, I'll give you an example, right? The whole BLM movement wouldn't be possible without Barack Obama, right? Him being, I don't think if he wasn't president, I don't think the BLM movement would even come into existence.
According to the Farrakhan, he ain't doing nothing for them.
No, I'm saying that
you know what I mean?
The amount of individuals that actually had some type of guts after there was an African American president to actually be outspoken about it.
No, I think that I think BLM happened because the racial tension got worse as a result of President Obama. People came out, going after, what the white man was upset the black man was the president, to be honest.
So let me start from let me start from Trump first. Like, a lot of people don't want Trump to be president. I talked to one individual, and I kind of liked what he was saying. He said, I don't want President Trump to be president because it's going to empower a lot of white supremacists and all that kind of stuff, and it's going to be the norm now because it legitimizes their concept, right? Yeah. And I think
to be honest with you, one of the things I feel, if some of these haters on Muslims, right, who hate Muslims, who hate it, I think the Muslims might actually benefit from that. We're too soft.
I know. We were just talking about that.
Guy, to be honest with you,
we were just talking about that.
A couple black guys, a couple punches to the face. Figure it out. Stop whining. Get strong. And you might benefit a little bit.
We were just talking about that. It's kind of like when the crunch is going to be a little more severe, it'll probably cause the Muslims to unite more. You might be even a blessing in disguise.
You might forget uniting. They might get on their knees and pray to God. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
And start using dua because you realize that nothing else is working, right? Nothing else is working. We are. Could you imagine if someone goes and says, our situation is never improving until we prove what is between us and Allah. When is the last time you heard that as an actual practical strategy, right? But no, that's viewed as, okay, that's nice. Now let's talk about the real way that we're going to get things done, right?
Yeah.
So.
And even with Trump's unpredictability, you never know. He might just be down with Muslims after tomorrow. Who knows? It's so out. No, because I've actually met brothers in other parts of the country who are who've been longtime Republican constituents. I met a guy once. He's he went to college with Ivanka's husband, and he's he met Donald in the Emirates. He was he was cool. He's okay. He just saying whatever he wants to do now just to get in office.
Yeah, I personally don't think that half the stuff he says. But the chilling thing is that all these individuals that came out of the woodworks that nobody knew. We knew they existed. We didn't think they'd come out so strong. And now they have to go back into hiding if he's not.
Well, I don't know if they go back to hiding. They might be more upset if Hillary wins because they're talking about rigged elections and stuff. They might riot and just go nuts.
Yeah, I heard taking over government buildings.
Yeah, militias, man.
All kinds of stuff.
They're preparing. If Hillary becomes president, they're preparing to take over, government buildings.
But that's
you know what the worst case scenario is, though? The worst case scenario is if Trump either actually wins or they accidentally make a mistake in the count and they announce that he wins, then they take it away from him.
Oh, yeah.
That would be a disaster. These militias would be going nuts.
Yeah.
Right? And then you have the country in gridlock like it was between Al Gore and Bush.
Yeah.
Right. I think the point that all of us agree with here is that it seems like every 4 years, we just get played. All we are is freaking pawns on the chessboard. They just get played every 4 years, and then we disappear. And a lot of brothers had their aversions to voting, and I understand that because sometimes Muslims, the only time we even show up is just to vote in the federal election every 4 years, and we get caught up in it. It's like an entertainment thing, but there actually isn't any grassroots work going on. Zero.
I was about to say that I think from a practical perspective, it's more important to be involved in the local township stuff.
Yeah.
Then this federal stuff is unilateral. The decisions that we care about are mostly both parties will, have one position on it, right?
Yeah.
I always laugh when someone, makes their vote based on Israel and Palestine. There's only one position on that in the whole country.
Yeah.
But the issue is that it's probably far more practical, right, to be involved in your local township and all that stuff.
Yeah, just to get that parking lot approved at your local masjid.
Yeah. Dr. Shadee, before we wrap up, where can people get a hold of you, learn more about you and stuff?
I guess I just have there's not much really to learn. I got a little bio on the Facebook page. All my stuff is on my Facebook page, honestly. All my stuff I put on the Facebook page. Facebook is what, for the 30-somethings now or something?
Yeah.
But it's all there. SafinaSociety.org is sort of just shows what kind of classes we're running. Some content there. The Safina Society YouTube and SoundCloud pages are where we have a lot of our stuff. So, that's basically where the content is being put out. And, there's a little bit of bio there on the Facebook page.
You do quite a bit of writing on your Facebook page. Have you thought about creating a blog?
I haven't really thought of a blog per se. I think there'll be probably more response on the Facebook page, right?
Yeah. But just something that maybe.
But a blog is better for keeping record of the stuff. The stuff is more accessible. You don't have to scroll down. That's what you're saying?
Right. For example, you make a new blog entry, and then people who subscribe to your mailing list on your blog page, they kind of get a notification that you put a new blog entry. For example, I have to actively remember you in order to go and check your page, because the way Facebook's algorithms come, not even you might be my favorite guy, but you won't show up at the top of my feed.
I got you.
Or at least not always.
I got you. Okay. So I didn't really even think of how the thing worked, but we can get the Shababis to put that together.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Good idea.
And you had mentioned, we talked about conferences, these mega conferences, but one conference I believe you do attend is that the Pearls of Quran conference in Virginia every year? Is that a regular?
I went there once.
Okay.
Yeah, I went there once. That's it. The conference that I go to second year in a row is actually in Australia.
Okay.
Right. Lebanese Muslim Association. They got some good guys out there. And, I don't mind going to that one. And I teach before that there. And Australia is an amazing place if you ever want to take a vacation. Really? Get away, right? You go to Australia. It's such a pretty country. Nice country to go to. But that's really the only one I go is just because it's a small operation and it's far way out there in Australia. So I don't feel like I'm plugging into, the, current scene, which I'm not interested in plugging into. But, so that's really the only one I do, to be honest with you.
Excellent.
I'm not saying I'll say no to everything, but I'm not interested. And I don't even like the lifestyle. Last time I went to Australia, he booked me I felt like a 5-star hotel. I mean, the thing had 2 rooms. It was like a suite. It had a tub, with one of these hot baths, whatever they call them, right?
Jacuzzi.
What are they called?
Jacuzzi?
Yeah, I got a jacuzzi in it. I was like, this is corruption, right? You're going to corrupt the person. Right. So I was like, I'm getting out of here. Put me in the little house, because I just saw at that moment what happens to people. Right. They arrive at the speaker circuit and they get put in these beautiful 5-star hotels. Right. You don't even want to go to the conference anymore. You just want to stay in the hotel room. So I was like, I sensed in myself, this is probably, not the best way to go about things. So I said, just put me in the little house next to the masjid. I prefer that. So
excellent. Hey, well, we appreciate you staying up with us. I know it's about midnight Eastern time over by you, so
no problem.
We'd love to have you on. I mean, it was a lot of good content that I think we just scratched the surface on.
And if you're in Chicago, please hit us up.
Yeah, man, come in studio, man. Come in studio.
I definitely will.
We put a lot of work into building the studio, so we would definitely love to have you in person.
Love to.
Absolutely. All right. For our listeners out there, if you have any questions or comments, you can email us at themadmamluks@gmail.com. You can also check out our website at www.themadmamluks.com. You can make a generous donation there. There are costs to this operation, so any support would be very met with gratitude. We don't make any money off this podcast, and we do it out of love and just having fun, and also getting to meet a lot of interesting people and have discussions with people like Dr. Shadee. So if you like what we're doing, please support us any way you can. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and then on iTunes, if you subscribe there, or any of the Android apps like Stitcher. And if you have iPhone, please leave us a 5-star rating. For our special guest, Dr. Shadee Al-Masry, for my co-host, Sheikh Amr Saeed, And Sim, this is Mahin for the Mad Mamluks, signing off. Assalamu alaikum.